Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the LEAD Network, now in our fourth month of this. Appreciate all of you joining us today. We have about 250 on right now. We're expecting a few more to join us. We have a really busy agenda today, and so before we get going to our agenda, just a couple of housekeeping items. One, a reminder to mute your computers. I can hear some background noise with some of our participants on the call. Two, again, just be mindful of the chat option that we have. Place your questions in the chat. Susie will be in the chat, as will I, on the second half of today's call. We do have all of the, an update on last week's chat. We did not send out any answers to the questions from last week because so many of them were themed towards items that the newly put together task force for return to participation would be addressing. So we will cover some of those today, and then there'll be a larger Q&A that goes out early next week. We're going to start today with a couple of things. I know first and foremost on everybody's mind is we're 3 weeks out from participation, and what's that going to look like? And we're also cognizant that yesterday the governor came out with executive order number 2081, which has some things for you. But before we get to the return to participation work that we've been doing, and especially what the LEAD liaisons and what the task force has done, we have a couple things for you. Our new website will be launching within the very brief future. And then also I'm seeing the spike on the eligibility side, as is Susie, with respect to transfers and appeals and reviews. And so we have a brief update on what's happening from the transfer and review process. So the first thing I'm going to do right now is just turn it over to Laura, and Laura technology items for you. Laura?
Good morning, everyone. So as many of you know, when we moved toward a new website last December and we're aiming for a late July rollout, it seemed like a great time to do it to get ready for the new school year. Then COVID hit and everybody's mind went in different places. And however, our website project has continued on, and it is still on track for a release. We're looking right now at the middle of next week. Thank you to the many people who have been involved with providing input and feedback. We've had a group of about 25 ADs right now who are providing an enormous amount of feedback as we get ready for that rollout to everyone. As I said, we are expecting a release in the middle of next week. And we'll be looking to the busy people within this group to take on some tasks to continue to help us build that. We'll be looking for you to add your own profile information, contact information, your name, your role, etc. We'll be looking for you to add information about your school, and that will actually build your school pages. We'll be looking to you to add accounts for those that work in your office. That would be your assistant AD or your AD assistants. So most of you have 1, 2, 3 of those. We need to get those people into the system. We'll be looking to you to work with your coaches. We will be enrolling fall coaches slowly first to make sure we're good to go for all 20,000 coaches. So I'll be sending you some sample emails that you can send out to your fall coaches late next week. And then individual team or activity pages, i.e. your baseball page, your speech page, your adapted softball page, those can be maintained by either you or someone in your office or someone on the coaching staff. So even to spend a little bit of time thinking just about workflows and how that might work. We successfully imported all of Minnesota ADs into the system yesterday, and currently those are in as blocked emails. But when we are live next week, know that you'll get an email to set up your account. You'll start to get some emails from me about how to set things up. We'll be sending you a lot of directions, sample communications, trying to make this as easy and streamlined as possible for you. But do want you to know that we need you in there as soon as possible because you're going to build those pages for your own school through the information that you put in as content. So even to be thinking about workflows, et cetera, and how this might work for you, if you have an assistant that you can pull in as quickly as you can and how that looks. In all, if you are a person who's comfortable with technology, I think this is probably 1 to 2 hours of work for you. If you are a person who's going to be a little bit less comfortable with technology, it's probably a 3 to 4 hour project. So again, just in time management, et cetera. My best guess is this email will go out to you late Wednesday or Thursday of next week if things continue as they are. I'm incredibly excited for it, but also know that it's a lot of work at a very busy time, and we'll work to make it as seamless and easy for you in that transition as we can. Just want to, because sneak previews are sometimes kind of nice, we do right now have a live homepage that you can get to if you know the development URL. And this has been populated and is growing as we go through. We also have dashboards built for people on your staff, and you'll log in and see your dashboard with all of your information on it too. So exciting things. And again, we are about a week out. We're going to continue by talking about transfers and reviews. Craig's going to talk a little bit about transfers and reviews in general. And then Susie's going to share a little bit of the technology pieces around how that's going to look in the new system also. So I'm going to turn it back to Craig, I believe.
Great work, Laura. Appreciate it. And I think everybody in the call needs to know just the time and energy that Laura has spent putting this together with key members of our staff and with our partners. Moving to transfer and reviews, and review is the official word we use for appeals, transfer eligibility reviews. And as many of you know, through the years, the approach to eligibility has been a team approach with Susie and I. And so what we did as we built this site for you is we listened to you and incorporated as many things as possible that you asked for. Things like the ability to make corrections, things like let's make everything electronic as we communicate between the schools that are involved in the transfer. And let's make it easy and understandable to use, and let's be able to modify it where we need to. So a lot of hard work has gone into this, and the key behind all of that, just specifically for this transfer document, is Susie. She has really developed this to meet your needs. So pretty excited how this looks. I'm going to turn it over to Laura and Susie as they walk you through a couple items. I have been scanning the chat. I picked up a couple things here that we'll talk about after this transfer walk through what our new pages look like. Susie and Laura. Great,
thanks, Craig. So I think, like Craig mentioned, I think all of you are really going to like this. I think it's going to make your jobs a lot easier. The first thing I want to note that I thought about the other day is that the transfer process used to start with that Word document that went between the receiving and sending schools. And that's all really been wrapped into this process now. So as you can see from the screen that Laura is sharing, the first step or the first piece in this is for the receiving school to fill out. And then when they submit it, it's going to now go to the sending AD. They're going to fill their part out, send it back to the receiving AD. So I think the flow is just going to be a lot better. Craig did mention a couple of things that it will allow for corrections. So if you put in a wrong grade or a wrong date, after you've submitted it, you can still go in and make those corrections. Previously, you would have had to complete a new form. And then it will also allow you to save your work as you go, which I know can be a big thing if you're plugging along doing your transfer form and all of a sudden something happens in the building and you need to step away. Well, the old system would have timed you out and you would have started over from scratch. So I think some of those features will make a big difference. As well as when you get into the review process, it's going to allow you to upload documents. So you're not going to have to email them to Craig and I, scan them and do all of those things. There will be, in the review piece, there will be just an area to go ahead and upload the documents. So I'm pretty excited. Like Laura mentioned, it's all a work in progress, and you know, we did this to the best of our ability, and there might be a few tweaks along the way, but we're pretty excited about it. Laura?
So the page that's showing right now is a page that will lead on your dashboard, where you're going to have a piece to view the transfers and reviews. You see, we still haven't fixed that word review everywhere that's going on. So you'll have a quick access to those students that you've transferred and those that are in different statuses. Again, the goal long-term for us is to bring our students across Minnesota in as users so that we can track and monitor eligibility even more seamlessly, where that list of students would already be in and you'd be choosing from them. So I saw a couple questions about notifications. Yes, notifications are a part of this. They actually show up in two different ways. One is on your dashboard. You'll see notifications here whenever there's something for you to do. So when a coach wants to affiliate, when a transfer process is back for you, you'll see notifications of that on your dashboard. And the intent is that you'll also receive the email on that. So really two ways that you'll see that work that's coming your way. The goal was really to keep it all in one place so that we weren't going back and forth with where's that email, where's that attachment, and keep it there. As Susie said, this process, and those of you that have done this for years, and I continue to learn, is huge and back and forth and has an awful lot of options on it. So we continue to figure out exactly what the wording is and how we can provide the best help and support. So looking forward to having you help us continue to build this. If there are things, as Susie and I talked about this morning, if there are things that we get 5 questions on, we have the ability to go in and reword that question to make it more clear. So please work with us as we continue to provide things like this that best serve you and other schools. With that, we're going to move off technology and move into some updates. And I think this is going to Craig and Bob at this point. And I'm going to find the right screen here and get back to sharing the presentation.
Thanks, Laura and Susan. I think those of you, as I'm checking in the chat, how excited you are about that and very complimentary of the work that's been done by Susie here and Laura. Just fantastic work. If you can believe it, gang, when I started 15 years ago, everything was paper. We had a one-page electronic form and everything else was paper that I sorted through every day. So looks like I'm getting out of here at the wrong time with as efficient as this is going to be. So great work again. A lot of questions in the chat on the most recent governor's order. We will be talking about that today, especially with the use of masks. I spent some time looking at it. We'll get to that. But right now I want to turn it over to Bob. Bob's going to give us an update on the lead liaison work that we had with them this week, but most importantly, the return to participation task force and the work that they've done, and then the hours of work that are ahead of them in the next 5 to 7 days. Bob?
Yeah, great. And Craig, maybe before we get specifically in that too, we'll address here in this slide the mask mandate as well. But very, very quickly here, let's think back to last spring and what we found out in March around COVID-19 and how it impacted our programs. I think one of the questions we continue to get is how we return to learn. Is that going to impact our participation? And again, last March, governor's orders directed schools to use schools for one of 2 things: food nutritional services and or childcare, right? So we're not sure what the governor will be saying here prior to the 27th, but our governor's orders now could look different, right? So if the governor's orders say you can be in distance learning, you can be in hybrid learning, or you can be in direct learning with students, and buildings can be used for other items, that gives us the opportunity to have fall activities, right, in your buildings. So last year, when we think to the spring, distance learning didn't mean we couldn't play, right? It was the use of our buildings by the orders of the governor that made that not possible to finish our winter sports and or our spring sports at that point in time. And we know we were in a different place. So kind of clear that slate and think forward here as we're preparing options we'll talk about later for our fall season and for individual sports, that those options are going to have a number of different variables, some of which will include how you return to learn and the 3 different options. One of the things we'd like you to do, though, within your district, we've asked you to create that administrative team and work with that administrative team within chat. And Jody will probably frame this question as well. In your local high school, if the governor orders allow, will your district allow participation if students are in a distance learning model only? Again, in chat, yes, no, or maybe. Will your district allow for participation if you're in a distance learning model only. And if you're not sure yet, that's okay. That would be a maybe. It assists us, right, as we're creating options, and it assists you, hopefully, that you have to be planning right no matter what that return to learning model looks like as well.
Well, Bob, as these flash by me in the chat, I see that maybe is our leading candidate right now. We're seeing some yeses and nos, but a lot of maybe. With those maybes, we would encourage you to have that conversation with your district administrative team and become more clarified on what would be allowed, because this is all going into the daily return to participation guidelines that we look at and that we're contemplating. And you need to know, ever since March 13th, as we did this exercise in preparation, hopefully for a spring season, and then as we looked at summer waiver June 1st and June 15th, we are looking at every possibility of having traditional participation. We also know that we might get some things thrown our way from the governor that changes what we're looking at, but that's what the task force has been doing, and that's what they're trying to come to create for you. Specifically on the governor's Executive Order 2081, I'm going to just go right to it, and I'll just read you a couple things off of it here, because this is the question that is coming to in the chat right now. Let me just switch screens here. So here's what it says on masks. It says, when you're participating in organized sports in an indoor business, which would be a private facility, say like a YMCA, or an indoor public facility, a space, excuse me, which is a school, and the level of exertion makes it difficult to wear the face covering, it can be removed. It goes on to say also, and this is 10B, this is 10A and 10B, it says, when they are exercising in an indoor public space, a school, a gym, or a fitness center, while the level of exertion makes it difficult to wear a face covering, you should always maintain social distancing. So really what they're saying is, for the default answer is have them wear their masks. I'm seeing in chat, should they wear them in volleyball? What should we do when it comes to Monday? The best thing for you to do is have them wear their masks. So for example, Bob and I actually talked about this morning, the volleyball situation. If they're going 6-on-6 on the court, yeah, they should be wearing their masks. But if you get into some kind of a conditioning exercise where breathing may be impacted, you do have permission in this governor's executive order to say, when the level of exertion makes it difficult, the mask could be removed. So there isn't a lot of specifics here other than anytime they're in a private or public athletic building, they need to have a mask. If the exertion level rises to the point it's difficult to breathe, they can remove it. They should always practice safe social distancing and wear a mask whenever possible. I was talking to an AD earlier this week who their football players outside during their summer training are following the social distancing, but everything they do, indoor, outdoors, weight room, whatever it is, mandatory requirement of the face mask. So I think that's probably the best answer here. That's your default answer. Bob, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think you nailed it, Craig. Thank you.
And so Bob, we'll take it now to, let me just switch screens here. We'll go next. You want to spend some time with the task force?
Yeah, let's do that. I think if we could get to our next slide there, Laura, we're looking, I believe we're on slide number 6, Laura, if that sounds correct. We need your help. We created the LEAD network, as Craig said, quite some time ago. Anything we can do to remain efficient and effective. Right now we have task force meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays. We have our LEAD liaisons on Tuesday, and then our LEAD networks on Thursdays. So when if we ask anything specifically from coaches, we would work through you, right? If we ask anything from coaches specifically, we may go through our advisory groups and or their coaches associations. So as we're working with short time getting to August 3rd, continue to use this LEAD network, continue to use our liaisons, and if they're coaches specifically, have them work through their associations. We do not ask our coaches to do anything specifically. Some of them are out there spending time on options or scenarios that may or may not exist. We don't want them spending their time on that, but they can have conversations with you as the AD in their school and or work through the coaches associations if there are questions. And please encourage them to use those channels. Again, it'll help us to be and our task force to be more efficient and or effective. Anything we can do to get the word out to coaches and or community members. When we start to see energized momentum or email campaigns to try and do this, that, or the other thing, that does not assist and that will not help in making a decision. Our decisions will be made by our board with input from our task force and obviously sending it your way as well. So anything you can do to help us with that would be greatly appreciated as we think about communication. So our task force met yesterday. Transition, Laura, for the second time, really getting into the work of creating options in terms of not only what our fall sports look like, but what our sports in general this year could look like with activities. We're going to start with sports because we know we start on either the 10th or the 17th, where you're at in terms of football. So any option that we create are filtered through what are called our guiding principles. These are broad and they're also deep. So for instance, when we think about health and safety to the greatest extent, we know that if we're participating, that COVID is going to impact participation in our state this year. We also know the impacts of mental health on our students, and there's great research that's been done and will be done regarding this. That will be taken into account around the health and safety. When we think about what type of opportunities we're allowing, we know there's youth sports going on out there, right? But we continue to be education-based, and we need to know that will look different than much of our community activities. Equity and fairness. I asked that question earlier because it gives you an idea and an example of what equity and fairness looks like around the state. We continue to ask the question with our task force as well. Does it need to be consistent across the entire state when we look at our different options? We will continue to do that, and we will do our best to be fair in doing so in what takes place, believing that we're beginning fall sports on August 17th. We can't predict what's going to happen between now and then. We can't predict what our board will say around the different options, but those options are to be prepared. We know where we're at financially. We often hear where you're at financially, and that means that our options have to work within that. And again, we're applying the guidelines consistently. From there, that's where we gauge our work. This is what we're looking at. Again, we're starting on the 17th. When we talk about interruptions, we've asked them to think about two different forms of interruption. Do we react to interruptions when they occur? Or do we plan our seasons accordingly, anticipating interruptions, weeks off, schools having weeks off, due to COVID related situations, and maybe things like shorten a season or compacting a season. Things like that are definitely options. We have to worry about what we currently have control of. We want to provide as much of a season as possible, right? Knowing that, again, portions of our state during the season will be interrupted by COVID, as we've seen during the summer coaching waiver period. Bylaws 501 and 502, when it talks about daily limitations, season limitations, weeks of a season, practice prior to participation, postseason, are great tools for us, and we're using those as a framework. So as you think about that, I know some of you have come up with your own options, and we appreciate your thoughts on those, and again, working with through the proper channels. But those are good models to use as you start to think about what a season could look like. When we think about health and safety standards, there's been much frustration about schools as you're working through COVID situations. One school will call in, and the MDH will give them one interpretation on a potential isolation or a quarantine, whereas school B may call in and hear something else. And then the doctor of the student athlete or the family may say something even different yet. And I think Eric will touch on that in a little bit too. So when we're thinking about the task force and their work, things like screening or health protocols, we will have those for you. Those will be run through sports medicine, and sports medicine will need to see those options that have been created. The first option being that we start on the 17th and all things are normal. But any options after that, sports medicine will have a say, and we will have protocols for you in each and every one of our sports and/or activities. Craig, anything I missed there?
No, I think you've covered it, Bob. We're going to have Eric join us here on this as well. And I think you've covered those really, really well with what the task force has been charged with. We have also just, we have looked at numerous guidelines set up by other state associations, and that provides us some additional information for our framework. But at the end of the day, we're creating what we hope will be a universal set of guidelines, a framework that allows us to return to participation with the traditional look and the traditional feel like we've had in the past. A couple chat questions here before we turn it over to Eric. The mask issue is, yes, I feel some of your pain in the chat. It is generally specific. I mean, it tells you what you should think about, but it doesn't really give us a very definitive set of guidelines. So I look at it like this. Again, if the exertion level rises to the level where breathing is difficult, then you should consider removing the masks. An interval of a volleyball rally on the court or 5-on-5 basketball scrimmage will have periods of intense working out or intense exertion, but you want to also look at what are the rest periods between the whistles or the ball out of bounds or the point being made in the rack. So again, I always go with, when in doubt, go with the conservative, which is to wear the mask and practice social distancing. You could play 5-on-5 basketball with masks and be within what would be less than 6 feet of each other, and you could do that. But if you're not going to wear your mask, you should think about practicing social distancing. And with some schools that have no defense, that probably won't be an issue.
Craig, could I jump in with a question for Bob real quick? Bob,
Sure.
There was a question in the chat about the makeup of the task force and specifically the voice of the superintendent and how important that may be in consensus building around policy and recommendations that are being made. So can you talk a little bit about the makeup of the task force, or where people can see who is there and what is really being, how we're integrating that or interfacing with superintendents as well?
Yeah, I saw the same thing. I'll turn it over to Bob real quickly, but one of the things I was going to mention with that is that we are working in conjunction with all the appropriate state organizations and groups. So whether it's the superintendents, the principals, the school board, they all have been contacted, and Eric has been in close contact with all of them. But Bob, I'll turn it over to you on the formation of the task force.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have liaisons representing all parts of the state along with board members. Some board members are also liaisons as well. And then we have, for instance, acting president of MNI AAA, another representative from private schools that has joined us on that. So our makeup is right around 12 to 15 with staff as well. Any of those products that are created and/or options is wide open in terms of communication. Eric is very connected not only with superintendents, but also principals. We're not going to do anything out of alignment. Again, we talked about education-based programming that isn't going to work for our member schools. So we believe that that's, again, in alignment, and we'll have correspondence with not only school boards, superintendents, but also our building principals as well. And for some, you are direct correspondence in that case too. So if there's more information that you need around this, let us know. It would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, just reach out through your lead liaisons if there's something specific you need. One of the things I should have mentioned at the start of the call is, every time we do have the lead network, I'm really conscious of the fact of starting on time and ending on time. We know that today's topics, especially with the executive order coming out yesterday, we'll probably go past 11:15. We're at 11:14 right now. We've got a couple more items to cover. If you do have to leave, just know that we will include this information in our updates on the microsite. So that being said, we'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Craig. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your continued work in your member school and all the leadership that you provide. Based on the number and the variety of questions that are out there, everyone on this call is in the same place. Still working through a lot of new information on a daily basis, trying to figure out the best answers as we go forward. Craig and Bob mentioned connections that we have. And so in the course of this week, yesterday afternoon, I was on a Zoom meeting for about an hour and a half working with state leaders from 11 states. Those are the Michigan, Ohio on the east side, and the Dakotas on the west, down to Missouri and Nebraska on the south side. And right now, except for Illinois, folks are either in the same position where we are, they're with their original schedule and haven't made any changes, or they have reaffirmed that they are moving forward with some level of participation beginning here in the fall. What they need to know, and what they've already said very clearly, is we know that that is as of 1:54 on Wednesday afternoon. That's where we are, and that things can change really, really quickly, and they may, and they have to be ready for that. In addition, as Craig said, I've been in on board meetings for both MSBA as well as with the MASA. And then really this week, on Tuesday afternoon, I spent time talking with Commissioner Tomes, who is involved with the Youth Sports Guidance Roundtable and is our primary contact there. He's been a great resource and has assisted us with a lot of information. A couple of key points there is that, you know, their focus continues to be on how do we assist schools and other organizations to run things safely. They talk about the fact of people know that differentiated answers to the same question are difficult. And so we all want some level of local control until that becomes difficult, and then we want clear guidance for everybody. And so one thing that they're working toward is putting standard protocols and practices when there are positives that come from either coaches or participants, and how to address that. What he did say is the better that you have things kind of disaggregated into pods and to smaller groups, the easier it is to continue your programming, address those test results, and keep the most participation going forward. He does not make the decisions at the education level. Yesterday afternoon, I spent about a half an hour with Deputy Commissioner Heather Mueller, who has, just like Commissioner Tomes, who coaches in the State High School League, Commissioner Mueller has a son who is in a member school and is excited for participation. So these people are right in it, both personally and professionally. She offered just good information around here's where we are. We're continuing to work through. They're not holding off on a decision, but they're leaning into some of those challenging pieces that are out there as far as how do we manage the differentiation that exists between a 3,500 student school versus a 150 student school. What does it look like in large areas of population versus small areas of population, and all of the things that are part of that. She mentioned that the best things we can be thinking about is what do we do in regards to interruptions, and how do we manage that? Do we build in time into schedules? How do we treat people fairly, the best that we can, when a school can't compete? Iowa is our best example. They had about 6% of their schools that encountered 2-week quarantines from time to time out of their baseball and their softball teams. And so they're great information for us to continue to plan and to think about and work with our task forces as we go forward. So Commissioner Tomes, one thing that he shared with me was that as of a week ago, there were some transmissions that occurred within activities and within organizations. And that they were not surprised by that, but they did not have major outbreaks in any place relative to tournaments and or gatherings, but knows that the better that those operate, and also exhibited a great amount of trust that the Minnesota State High School League and its member schools are going to be well suited to provide as safe of experience for students as possible, and that they will be consistent. And that's hats off to all of you for the work that you do, all the questions that you ask, and all of the planning that each one of you are doing at your local schools. Our task force is working exceptionally hard, just based on the questions that you have. You know, that you're asking all the same questions that they're working at, and trying to put those things together the best that they possibly can. And so we will continue to try to be on time with information. What I would say is, and it's been mentioned in the chat, is our August 4th board meeting would be the next time frame in which determinations would be made. That would be made based on what we hear from the educational planning that comes through next week. We don't have early information on that, and I don't believe that they're even set yet at where that's going to be. And as soon as we get that, we'll combine that with what we have with recommendations from the task force, bring that information to the board in a timely manner, and then move forward with directives back to our State High School League member schools as to how we move forward as an organization. Greg, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Eric. As Eric just demonstrated, we're daily connected with all of those other organizations and seeking their input. I'm looking through the chat, and I think we've answered most of the questions. Again, we'll have something ready for you on the microsite. One of them that was a concern raised last week, and I want to assure all of you that it is part of the task force review, is what does travel look like? And what do multiple levels of participation look like? And how might that work into a, say, a swimming schedule or into a soccer schedule? So those are some of the things that we're seeing that are really being looked at in the task force. Bob, anything else, or Laura from the task force that you want to bring up?
Yeah, again, Craig, and you and I have talked about this. We talked about it at our meeting yesterday as well. We will look at each and every individual sport and when the best opportunity is to play that, based on currently where we are at. All right, there are options out there where they would like to take a season and the term flip it with another season. At this time, that is not an option that we are considering or looking at, but we are looking at individual sports and when will be the best possible time to play those sports and options within that as well. So flipping an entire season, again, I think we've said that for the last 3 weeks, is not something that we're looking at right now, but we know it continues to be out there as well.
Yeah, and the approach we're taking is we are trying to ensure that all activities have participation in their traditional season. What can we do to make that happen? Whether it's a full season, a delayed start, a reduced season, we're still looking towards the traditional placement of these programs. And at the end of the day, we know that that might not be a viable option, but that's the very founding principle, I think, when you look at the guiding principles and what we're trying to do is what can traditional participation look like in the traditional season? Laura, anything else you want to add from the task force? Mute.
That group just continues to do a nice job on a very tight time frame, and that group has a lot to do around the work. So as Bob shared earlier, the more you can do to direct coach questions to you or coach questions to their athletic advisory group, just very helpful.
I think Laura brings up a good point too within the task force. So anytime we ask a question statewide, the results look an awful lot like we asked if your district would be able to allow participation in a distance learning format. We get some that say yes, we get some that say no, we get a whole lot that say maybe. So Craig talks about taking a season that's in a sport in a traditional season and trying to do something different with it. That tends to be the feedback that we get. That doesn't mean we don't continue to look at it and consider it within our options as well. But it is, again, when you're talking about statewide, that is magnified, right? Knowing that depending on where you're at, it may be easier for some. And do we look at that again and being statewide consistent around decisions that are made? Multi-sport athletes in our communities is huge. So just taking one sport and moving into another season, there's a cascading effect that we've talked about. And those are things that we continue to look at.
Thanks, Bob. One of the things I would say as I'm just scanning through the chats real time here is I can tell you that with every question that's been asked today in the chat or every piece of information that's placed in there, league staff have actually discussed everything that is in the chat today almost on a regular daily basis. And the majority of them are with the task force. Seems to be a lot right now on travel and also on participation waivers. And Eric does have a response in the chat on travel. Travel is always a local control issue. So you need to work with your school administrative team and your school district or school legal counsel if you're going to look at alternative methods where the students and or their parents might provide the travel. So that's a local control. With respect to participation and acknowledgements of participation and the COVID, that's the areas we're looking at health and safety wise with our legal team at the league. What does that look like? And then also you need to be prepared for this too with your student athletes is, should you have someone test positive, you need the ability to do contacts tracing. And so you will need to work with your students and parents to get their permission to say, we need to find out who you were with and we can track that. And we'll get more of that in the next few weeks, but those are just some of the things when we look at when it comes to the waiver. One more question I see, Laura, that just popped up.
We have one more question to put out to this group. And as we talked about this earlier this morning, it sounds like a question that we've asked before in this group. However, we know how quickly things change and which decisions have been made and which you are still looking to make. So if you would at this time pop into the chat and add currently, and it may be the same as the last time we asked this question, but currently, what are those two biggest challenges for your community around return to participation this fall? Again, these answers go to task force people as they're continuing to move through decisions also. So if you would answer that in chat, that would be appreciated.
Well, so far, it looks like transportation and positive results are the number one and number two as they fly by me here in the chat. Safety, Bob, also, and you know, our task force has spent a significant primary focus on safety that guides every discussion we have with them.
And I appreciate the comment, Craig, on face mask and why is the MDH language so vague? Why couldn't it be? It's so gray. I think we've had experience in that, right? I mean, that's how we've worked, and it's left to us to interpret the language. We'll try and get you more clarified interpretations of what that looks like, especially around our indoor sports, right? That's what we're talking about around the governor's proclamation. So
Absolutely.
spectators is another one. I think MDH regulations will probably out of that. Yet we'll try and be consistent as well.
Yep. So I'm seeing transportation or travel, positive testing. What's this look like for spectators? The waiver is an issue. Anything else you've seen, Laura, as you're tracking this, or Suze? One last one for you too is I want you to know that Eric also has been working with our insurance carriers to see if there's anything that we need to do differently as a league or that you might have to do as a member school. So we'll again be providing you some information on that moving forward. So I think, Bob, Laura, we're ready to wrap it up. Thanks again today, gang. We had over 300 with us. A lot of questions that will help guide us and our task force in the next 5 to 7 days. And again, work through your lead liaisons. They'll be able to provide you information and gather information from you as we get ready for our return to participation. And again, I'm the optimist here, gang. I'm very hopeful that we start on either the 10th or the 17th. And that optimism is what carries us. And because of those beliefs in what's great for kids and getting them back to participate and for our communities, we're doing everything we can to make it safe. So our task force should have some more depth and breadth for you next week. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, gang.
Laura, I think I'm just going to give them another minute or two on the chat just in case.
Fast typers or the slow typists are just getting some of their responses in.